Hey, this is Shelby Berger, and this is my Module 7 Wrap It Up project. So my philosophy of online teaching and learning is to create a comfortable, trusting environment where students feel comfortable taking risks and sharing ideas, as well as to offer consistent support to my students and to be honest and relatable. It's important to create meaningful and authentic learning experiences for my students and provide opportunities for collaboration and community building. It's important to work with my students on being active learners and to be available and flexible and encourage my students to persevere. And I was able to form my philosophy after reading chapter 4 this week. So for putting my philosophy into action, I aligned it with some of the standards and some of the more specific parts of the standards. So for standard A, for being a reflective practitioner, it's important to reflect and find the opportunity for growth and plan for each part of the day. For demonstrating an understanding of effective time management strategies, in addition to planning for each part of the day so that you don't run out of time for important things. It's important to also build in time for feedback and explaining instructions and collecting data. So for maintaining accurate records of relevant information and communication, it's important to log communications and give feedback on student work and provide documentation for that, as well as working with students on monitoring their own progress. For standard B, discipline specific technologies, tools, and resources to meet individualized learner needs. The UDL guidelines explain the importance of providing different experiences that can be individualized for specific student needs. And going along with this, using different tools to interact in online courses to nurture learner relationships, encourage interaction, and motivate engagement. It's important to make learning fun. So use games like Kahoot and Blookit, as well as Nearpod, and also using breakout rooms to help build that community between students. It's also important to have clear expectations and model appropriate interactions and feedback with one another. As for Standard C, for learner-centered instructional strategies, breakout rooms and small groups and peer-based learning are ways to keep the online learning learner-centered, as well as for developing a community among culturally diverse learners. It's important to have consistent expectations and continue to model appropriate communication, as well as sending important announcements in various formats and expressing interest in your students' personal lives and giving students the opportunity to actually share about themselves, as well as give input on others' interests. For standard D, learner engagement, enable the learner to customize the pace or the path. So Zern and iReady are two programs that we use at my school. Zern it goes along with our math program, and it will slow down the practice problems if the students are not being successful. So it'll reteach things that the students get wrong. So that's able to customize it to the learner needs. And iReady provides a path for each student based on their diagnostic, and that path is also individualized to each learner. For helping the learners reach content mastery through instruction and quality feedback, it's important to, when you're doing online instruction, to have office hours when students can come meet with you one-on-one or in small groups, as well as to comment on work with feedback, and also to respond to questions in a timely manner, whether it's through an email or some type of messaging system. For digital citizenship, standard E, a way to facilitate learning experiences that model and promote digital citizens are providing screencasts for the students. This could provide directions, or it could just show the way that the students should be interacting with one another. For diverse instruction, standard F, communicating with the appropriate school staff when my students are pulled out for intervention groups like Title I or for special ed. I do communicate with those teachers to make sure that the learner is getting the best, all of their needs met. And of course, we provide any modifications or adaptations that are necessary. And for providing additional opportunities for personalized learner growth or enrichment. When we did online learning, I did sign certain students up for CodeStir, which would be challenging for some students, but was a good enrichment activity. I would also give students opportunities to create forms for their classmates that they could fill out, like Google Forms, and they really enjoyed that. We did that like while we were learning about graphs a good amount, and they would graph their data. For standard G, choosing appropriate assessment tools, we would use a lot of different assessment tools such as Google Slides and Forms, but also I would formatively assess using whiteboards when we were doing synchronous instruction. Some of the asynchronous instruction or assessment tools we used, once again, Zern and iReady, and also providing feedback as a way of assessing their learnings. For standard H, instructional design. For designing learning experiences that use technology to efficiently engage learner, we would do online games, I would build games into Nearpod and activities, I would use Pear Deck as well as digital whiteboards, sometimes shared whiteboards, and there are also some academic activities on GoNoodle. For incorporating diverse media, we would do multicultural readings and videos, and I would always allow students to share their traditions and relate themselves to the characters in the story or to whatever type of video we might have been watching. For incorporating subject-specific and developmentally appropriate digital learning resources, I made sure that I had grade level reading passages, and when we would use word problems in math, I would apply it to their lives. So it would be word problems that they can understand and relate to, such as eating cupcakes or the number of students in a class. I would also have them do journals each morning where they would they would respond to a prompt, and those prompts were always age appropriate, and they were able to relate to them. So the 3 types of interaction for social and emotional learning that I have learned to really focus on are student content interactions. So this could include writing prompts, such as those journals that we do every morning when they're related to the content, or just any other writing prompts that the students might do in response to something we're learning, as well as preparing discussions that go along with the content. For student-instructor interactions, I did mention I provide office hours. Of course, the chat function on Zoom was always a good idea. I would always have students typing to me in the chat, and I could help them that way, as well as providing feedback and also just having any discussions synchronously. For student-to-student interactions, we would do breakout rooms, we do morning meeting games, as well as full group discussions. Going along with this, the types of feedback are really important in helping your students socially and emotionally. So the content of the feedback should highlight the strengths of the student as well as give at least one area of improvement, and these should be provided in a timely manner so that the students can actually utilize this feedback and it will help them in the future. And the delivery of it should be respectful and motivating. Continuing with this, there are some strengths and weaknesses that go along with social and emotional learning asynchronously as well as synchronously. Some of the strengths for asynchronous learning are the flexibility and the convenience of it. They can do it pretty much at their leisure, as long as everything is done by the due date. There are fewer participation constraints, so everybody can say everything they want to say, and that goes along with the depth of the reflection. The students actually have time to think about what they want to say and put it into words that are meaningful. And students may take more risks if they feel more comfortable. If the shyer students feel more comfortable working so that other students can't hear them or see what they're doing, they may take more risks that way. Some weaknesses of asynchronous learning could be fewer opportunities for spontaneous learnings. So all those learnings that happen during discussions and during when students ask questions and answer questions, they obviously do not happen as much with asynchronous learning. There's more likelihood of procrastination. It's more impersonal. They don't get that human interaction as much, and that lends to there being less interaction intensity. For synchronous learning, the strengths are that there are stronger connections that can be formed, so that community cohesion is there more. They have those student instructor interactions as well as the student to student interactions. There's more opportunities for those spontaneous learnings to occur that I mentioned before. And also games and group activities absolutely help with building a community as well as with students learning and reviewing content. Some weaknesses of synchronous learning are the participation constraints and the time constraints. Sometimes students may not be able to say everything they want to say just due to timing and needing to move on, as well as just not being able to hear everyone's full opinion or the stories that they like to tell. So the readings have had a big impact on my teaching. So in Module 3, the Chapter 5 online interaction reading helped me with using social emotional learning strategies in my classroom. So I'm making sure that I'm always keeping those 3 interactions in mind: the student and content, the student to content interaction, student instruction, as well as student to student, and giving feedback as much as possible and as quickly as I can, but still making it meaningful. I do try to give immediate feedback as often as possible. In Module 4, Chapter 5 about online communication tools, some tools we read about were brainstorming on a digital concept map, which I have utilized, as well as reflection in a media sharing site. So I've had students do written reflections, and we've just started doing recorded reflections, like using Flipgrid. And that lends me to the next one, which is screencasts and Flipgrids for discussions, or they can be used to demonstrate mastery. In Module 5, Chapter 8, learned a lot about how to make assignments more accessible, so adding in that alt text, using headings and styles to make it the reader read it in the correct format, in the correct order, and using pre-made formats as well. In Module 6, understand the UDL guidelines was really eye-opening. Obviously engagement, representation, and action and expression have always been important and are known to be important to all teachers. But reading more in depth on the guidelines website, I was able to more easily understand how to go about meeting these principles. So it gave a lot of really good examples of how to do this. So like, for example, providing checklists for self-regulation and providing times for students to stop and think can encourage more thoughtful answers and reflections. I also really am excited to utilize the UDL Tech Toolkit. So I've already signed up for Actively Learn, which I'm excited to start using, as well as the time tool. I know that will help my students with telling time, as well as code.org. So finally, a few ahas came from the Universal Design of Learning module. So in Principle 1, promoting expectations and beliefs that optimize motivation. It's really important to provide prompts, reminders, guides, checklists for our students, which a lot of the time I don't think I do in the best way. I think I need to be more specific with my guidelines and prompts and checklists sometimes in order to help my students self-regulate and self-monitor themselves, as well as setting goals. And I think if I do this, their frequency of their self-reflection and self-reinforcements will increase. In Principle 3, guiding appropriate goal setting, as well as supporting planning and strategy development. Same thing, just providing checklists and scaffolds and things like that. And a quote that really hit me from the online constructivism reading. After reading what the 6 factors are: teacher support, student interaction and collaboration, personal relevance, authentic learning, active learning, and student autonomy, the quote says, enjoyment, a likely result of the previous 6 factors, can predict student success in an online learning environment. So I thought that was really important, because when students are enjoying what they're doing, they're learning well. And the question I have is, I don't know if it can